For more on the significance of the meeting and whether it will help smooth relations between Israel and the U.S., we're joined by Phyllis Bennis. She's a fellow at the Institute for Policy Studies, where she's an analyst of Middle East studies. Phyllis, welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here.
So it seemed in front of the cameras, both leaders, you had the handshake, you had the smiles, and the message seemed to be, yes, we have differences, but there are also areas we agree on. My question to you is, what really went on behind the scene? Not that you know exactly what went on, but your perception about how this meeting went today.
Well, I was not a fly on the wall at this meeting.
I wish I was.
I wish we all were. I wish they had done something publicly.
Yes.
But I think that what's important here, this was all about the politics. This was all about the optics. This was about, for the Prime Minister of Israel, could he still claim that he has not completely damaged the Israeli relationship with the United States, as many of his critics inside Israel have said? For President Obama, it's, can I make it look as if I'm not what my critics are saying, which is that I have been responsible for breaking the relations with Israel. In fact, it has been the actions of Israel that have made it impossible for President Obama to do what he clearly has wanted to do, to maintain a tight relationship with Israel. On the policy level, he has maintained that. Israeli officials outside of the political realm, the strategic officials, will say that the Obama administration has been more pro-Israel than essentially any other administration in history. But the personal relationship and the political relationship has been a very difficult one. And that's what they were dealing with here. This is all about the consolation prize Israel will get for the Iran deal, which Israel is perceived as having lost because it sort of inserted itself into that debate in U.S. politics so dramatically.
And let's talk about that, the Iran nuclear deal and Netanyahu's controversial speech before Congress.
Absolutely.
I mean, you got to wonder what that did to this relationship between the two countries.
Well, I don't think it did much to the relationship between the two countries.
Or the two leaders, I should say.
It made a lot of difference between the two leaders and between the political echelon on both sides. For Democrats in the mainstream of the Democratic Party here, and we see this in the decision of the Center for American Progress, which calls itself a progressive think tank, but then invited this alleged war criminal, accused of war crimes from many forces around the world, the Prime Minister of Israel, Netanyahu, to speak there tomorrow. So I think that what we're seeing is an effort by Netanyahu to prove that his relationship is still bipartisan. This was clearly a political move on the part of the Israeli embassy and the Prime Minister to convince the leaders of CAP to invite him, something they never would have done under ordinary circumstances, and of course in the run-up to the US elections where all this plays a role. But more important than all of the politics is the strategic changes that are underfoot. And this is very dangerous because what we're seeing now is that in the wake of the US-Iran agreement, which of course involved a number of other countries, including China as well, you have a situation where Israel claims this is against us, we lost, so we want something to make up for it. And what they're now apparently asking for, which I heard just now from Bibi Netanyahu, has not been their position before, they're asking for $5 billion a year.
That was in Jessica's piece.
Just now I heard that. And what we had been anticipating was that the increase would go from the current $3.1 billion a year to an outrageous $4.7 billion. Now we're hearing it's actually more than that. They're asking for $5 billion a year, and that goes straight to the Israeli military. It's absolutely destabilizing the region. It says nothing about the Israeli nuclear arsenal. The one nuclear arsenal in the Middle East does not belong to Iran, it belongs to Israel.
And you know, United States would argue Israel is its closest ally in the Middle East. They've had this close relationship through the years. The only real I'm just saying this is what they
that is
say.
The argument.
So I want to just set that clear. And Netanyahu is the democratically elected Prime Minister of Israel.
He is elected. I think there's a real question about whether to call it a democracy. It is a great democracy for the 80% of the Israeli population who is Jewish. Jews like me do very well in Israel. The 20% who are Palestinians, not so much. They have the right to vote, but there are 50 separate laws in Israel that discriminate by law between Jews and non-Jews.
And very quickly, Phyllis, where do you see the relationship between these two men going? Is there a way they can repair it?
I don't think that's the most important thing. What's important is what is the U.S. continuing to do to enable the continuation of Israeli occupation. We just heard they're planning 2,000 new homes to be built in West Bank settlements, all of which will be illegal under international law. The U.S. is now going to give potentially $5 billion a year for the next 10 years. That's $50 billion of our tax money directly to the military of this country, which is itself the 23rd wealthiest country in the world. This is the problem. It's not about the relationship between the two men.
All right, Phyllis Bennis, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.